Welcome to The Disappearing Mind, a unique podcast helping you find clarity and support along your dementia journey. Now, join National Dementia Trainer and Coach Dawn Platt for an all-new episode.
Welcome to the Disappearing Mind podcast. I am your host, Dawn Platt, dementia advocate, coach, and memory care leader. I am happy today to talk with you again. I am so excited you've joined the podcast again. The podcast was created to support those walking the complex journey, the emotional, cognitive challenges of dementia, whether it's individuals experiencing memory loss or caregivers, friends who are helping someone along the way. While I hope that we are able to continue to advocate for breakthroughs and cures. Today, we're going to talk about focusing on the now. Some very practical information that I'm really glad to bring to you and talk about. We are going to go through a series with my guests, 3 different episodes, to talk about some practical strategies. I think the topic is going to be something that you can get a hold of, that you can apply no matter where you are in life. We're going to explore some science, practical strategies, professional insight, that's for sure, and navigate the subject of brain health with someone who has an expertise, I think, that's going to help us today. So today, our guest is someone who has been serving patients, serving the public for some time, and has a personal story to tell. Her story kind of bridges the science and the personal story between nutrition and brain health prevention. So I want to welcome Carrie Bloemers. Carrie today is the author of The Mind Diet for Healthy Aging and Daily Tracker. Welcome to the podcast, Carrie.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to get into this. I shared before we started recording that, you know, one of the things that happened to me just this week at the National Alzheimer's Dementia Roundtable is I got to meet Maggie Moon and hear a little bit about her research and studies in the Mind Diet. And today I'm very excited to have you because I think that you bring a very practical approach to my listeners, to our listeners, and those on the dementia journey, no matter if the individual has been diagnosed, the family caregiver who is supporting them, or just someone in general, I think that's concerned about the future. But I want to ask you today, let's begin with your role, Carrie. Tell us a little about yourself.
I love to. So I am a registered dietitian. So that is my first passion and love. And I graduated from the University of Cincinnati. I'm from Ohio and earned my degree there. And shortly after moved to Florida. I've held different roles as a dietitian, including meal and recipe development to clinical time, and moved to Lee Health in Fort Myers, where I first work in outpatient type nutrition, so one-on-one counseling. And after doing that for a few years and then personally starting a family, moved into a community-based center that we call Healthy Life Center. And that's where I really became a dedicated educator for our community and put together different lectures and topics. And quickly, early on in that role, I actually found Maggie Moon's book and her research and expertise as one of the dietitians in the field leading that conversation on nutrition and brain health. I developed some curriculum around it and have been teaching on that ever since. And it's truly my favorite topic in nutrition to talk about, to write about, to read about, because of that correlation with lifestyle and really that hope that it gives that, you know, we have this control over the expression of some of our genes, and the lifestyle has a really, really big influence. And it does start with nutrition, but also includes some other pillars in lifestyle I'm sure we'll get to.
Carrie, I'm so excited to review your book. But before we do, I want to point something out. And, many people use a term nutritionist very loosely, but you are a registered dietitian. And with all the social media out there, I want you to talk about, not just in terms of education, which you've talked about, but your training and scope of practice, because what you talk about is proven science.
Yeah.
So let's talk
Yes.
about that a little bit versus what someone may see on Facebook or TikTok. Let's talk about, your role as a registered dietitian and the difference.
Absolutely. And right now is March and it's National Nutrition Month. And that's one of our themes this year is about that clinical-based evidence practice and going to the research. And so we are trained and we spend so much time in our undergrad and then advanced studies reading journals and papers and even evaluating the quality of journals and papers that we're reading. So that means we're not taking headlines or sound bites as fact or truth. It might be a launching point to really inspire some curiosity, and then you dig and turn to the research and what's really happening in these sensational headings and titles. And really the thing about nutrition is, and much of medicine as a whole, what works for one person doesn't mean it's going to naturally work for someone else. So we do have a lot of influencers or coaches or folks that may take their own learnings of what worked for them and educate others and the masses on, hey, do this, it worked for me. And so that's where, you really want to press pause and think about it, and how we're all unique. We all have different life circumstances, different medical histories. There might even be other prescription drugs people take or don't take that we have to consider. So dietitians, when they do work with patients, they're really working individualized with people in the patient medical record. So they have that whole history, family history, medications, all the things that you'd want considered when we start talking about anything from dietary and lifestyle changes. So I'm a big advocate of continuous education and reading. That's another thing, dietitians, we have continuous education requirements. Nutrition's actually a fairly young science, so we are constantly really hitting discoveries, learning new things. So we're required to continue that education in a formal manner that's also regulated by our different credentialing bodies.
Well, with all of the changes and new information or differing information, I think that we're hearing now in the news and in social media, I'm very happy to hear you say that. And I think it is an evolving science. So in your practice, what populations do you primarily serve? And are you working with prevention, chronic disease, cognitive concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my current role of System Director of Wellness at Lee Health, we really serve a few different audiences for wellness. And when it comes to the community, we're doing a lot of education and prevention type initiatives in that space of improving quality of life, even through teaching kitchens and having hands-on nutrition education where people can come learn new cooking skills for prevention of, whether we say, or chronic disease management, or they want to learn more about brain health and eating healthy that way. I'm also really involved in workforce wellness. So I think these same principles will get to apply to people that fall in any decade of life. That's also one of the reasons I love this topic, is because what we do in our 20s and 30s and 40s, we're really seeing all that correlation and great data that it's going to impact our quality of life, our lifespan, really that health span part, and how our brain ages as we get older. So working in that workforce area is really exciting to me as well.
Well, that's exciting for my listeners because we're always talking about the dementia journey, and we'll get into that. But over this last decade, and you've alluded to that, right? We've seen increasing research linking dietary patterns to cognitive decline and neurodegenerative disease. So what does this literature, or what are the studies, what are you learning actually show?
Yeah. When I speak to the community, when I start, sometimes I say, none of this is actually really going to surprise you, because it's actually kind of putting the research behind some of those quality pillars of nutrition that we've heard throughout time. So it is, about eating those greens and those vegetables, right? We've heard about berries and different berries. And I think about like back when acai berries were like the craze, and then you hear blueberries and raspberries and strawberries. But holistically, it puts that berry group together and say, yes, they're powerful. It doesn't mean you're going to eat blueberries and that's going to be magic and everything is going to be great for you with your nutrition and health. But it includes those dietary patterns. Like, yes, include berries. Any type are fine. So I think it helps decrease some of the sensationalism of different titles or like individual components, and puts it together as a larger body of nutrition research as well.
So, Carrie, you wrote the Mind Diet for Healthy Aging with a daily tracker. Why this book and why now?
Yeah, so I love to write in as one way to educate folks, and that's something that just was a goal that I had really back as an undergrad, and I didn't even know what it meant at that time. And really, that idea of like one day I'm going to write a book. And last summer, or it would be 2 summers ago now, we actually spent some extra time in Ohio where my family is, and it gave me a little space to think about this project creatively. And we were specifically spending time with my parents, my mom and dad, and my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And that was also that moment of how my knowledge can provide value to others who may have neurocognitive type conditions or want to prevent them. When I wrote the book, I was thinking about folks that may have already maybe hit their 40s or 50s or 60s, or very caretakers for patients that have neurocognitive decline. But I was also thinking to myself and my friends and family and everyone that it's like, hey, if I could tell you anything, or you want to come to me for nutrition advice, I'm going to point you all to this Mind Diet protocol. And here's really the reason why, and here's a tool for getting started.
Carrie, what is the Mind Diet?
Yeah, the Mind Diet it's just such a fun acronym. I didn't come up with it, right? The researchers did, but it stands for the Mediterranean and dash intervention for neurodegenerative delay. So it's a big mouthful, and it's all about the mind and brain and preventing that delay. So we all can think about the Mediterranean diet and the lifestyle, and you probably have things that pop in your head already, like I hear extra virgin olive oil a lot, and fish and produce. I even hear wine. And DASH is sometimes harder for people to place. That was the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. That was very popular in the like early 2000s. Very high in produce, so fruits and vegetables, low in sodium, low in excess fats, very low in saturated animal fats. So they really looked at people who included foods from these dietary patterns over time, and therefore correlated that with the amount of that neurodegenerative, in this instance, delay, meaning how protective was it to eat these foods over time.
Wow. I know that both of those things, one of the things that really triggers me that you said, and I like to talk about a lot on the podcast, is delay. Delayed progression. And a lot of people,
Right.
think about the dreaded AD, Alzheimer's disease. They think about the doom and gloom, but they don't think about delay. And even people, who've been diagnosed can delay a lot of symptoms and things. Let's talk briefly. And I want to remind our audience that we have 3 different episodes, and I have so much to ask you. I might repeat myself. I may not get through it all because there's so many questions I have. And I want to say to the audience, we're going to talk, later on about the Mind Diet for Healthy Aging and where you can get your hands on it. I want to say that Carrie's book is not only practical, it is an easy read, and I feel like it has a lot of flexibility, and it's easy to follow. And we'll get into that in a minute, but Carrie, you've talked a little bit about delay. So let's talk briefly here about nutrition and diseases like Alzheimer's disease or related dementias and Parkinson's, which you are very familiar with personally now. Are we talking prevention, slowing progression, symptom support, or all of the above?
Yeah, really, I think we're seeing all of the above, which is the exciting, and again, like using that word hope, but to delay. So it's really empowering, I think, for consumers to receive that message that, hey, even with genetic components or family history, with our lifestyle choices, we have some influence over how that progresses. So we're seeing that there's a stronger correlation with the more of these foods you include, the better the protection. And that's really at any phase in the journey here. Now, I do usually talk about the genetic component, the APOE, that is relevant to the dementia conversation, right, and Alzheimer's disease. And what though that includes is that a majority of us fall in that main middle tier where we don't necessarily have the gene for it that puts at us higher risk, and we don't necessarily have that one that's rare and super protective. A majority of the population falls in that middle. It's like, I think the percentage is 75 to 80% of us have neutral genetics when it comes to that APOE gene for Alzheimer's disease. To me, again, that is empowering to consumers. Like, yeah, what you eat is going to, are you fueling disease or are you protecting from disease, right? What we do, our physical activity, our amount of sleep, our sleep quality, our stress level, all those things are levers that then we have a lot more autonomy over when we talk about this progression and then delay onset of dementias and other conditions.
So in your book, you talk about and you reference pioneers. So this isn't something that has just been in your generation. There's pioneers out there doing it. There are now studies, the Pointer study and other studies referencing whole food philosophy. But you talked about Ann Wigmore in your book and
Yeah.
the power of nutrient dense eating. Talk about
Yes.
that inspiration as you were thinking about teaching and writing this book.
Yeah. And I flipped to the page so I would get her words correctly. And it goes, the food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. I include that as a slide in a lot of group education that I do as well to help people really reframe food as a functional tool. It has so much deep seated meaning for folks, culturally, family traditions, the way we were raised, cravings and comfort. And that's all valid. And I really like, I recognize that. And I know you had mentioned like there's room in this plan, in this book, right, to accommodate those type of things. But really putting the main thing of what we do as really reframing food as that fuel, and it is our best form of preventative medicine is what we eat and what we have every single day.
So let's expand a little bit on the core pillars of the Mind Diet that you emphasize in your book. Tell us what some of those core pillars are. I have them listed here, but I felt like you were very practical, and you just mentioned that, and so did Maggie Moon in her presentations.
Hmm.
She realizes that we have cultural reasons for eating. We
Yeah.
have all of those reasons for eating, but still the core of what we can do can be practical and helpful to our brain health. But what are the core pillars of what you put in your book?
Yeah. So with the book I wrote, I really focused on the research-based groups of the Mind Diet, right? So there's 10 food groups to enjoy. Those are the ones that we're correlating all this protective benefit to. Then there's 5 groups that we want to avoid because we've also seen those associations and correlations that, hey, these foods drive inflammation in the body, right? They're correlated with more chronic disease and heart disease, and that's all related. But also pulling in some lifestyle pillars. So the physical activity, the sleep, the stress management through mindfulness, nature. That's a fun one that I'm really diving into the research on for overall wellness and well-being, as another of those lifestyle pillars as well.
Right. So there are things like leafy greens daily,
Mm-hmm.
berries multiple times a week, whole grains,
Yes,
olive oil as a primary fat, if that's culturally acceptable. I think there's some substitutes for that. Fish
sure.
weekly, limiting our saturated fats. What surprised you most about the research so you're a registered dietitian, right? But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you really pick this up in this concept, for me, I am a researcher, I'm a dementia coach, I've been in this space for a long time, but there's certain core
Mm-hmm.
things that I grab a hold of, right? And one of those is delayed
Mm-hmm.
cognitive decline or
Yeah,
preservation of cognitive decline.
sure.
What most surprised you? What do you champion in this research that you bring to your practice and your patients every day?
Yeah. You know, one significant thing that the researchers call out that I emphasize to folks is that the dark leafy greens receive their own call out and category. It also includes all other vegetables. So to me as a dietitian, when we have all these, powerful superfoods, that the green leafy vegetables got their own call out, like have those every single day, at least a cup. And a cup is like the size of your fist if it's leafy greens, or a half cup cooked every single day. To me, that's significant because it isolates that powerful nutrients that are associated with those leafy greens. Yes, we still want other vegetables and we want other colors in those other vegetables, but those dark leafy greens were called out. So that was one that I was like, that's meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So let's shift a little bit from clinician, right, to
Hmm.
daughter. So
Sure.
your father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
Hmm.
You support patients professionally in your practice. You do practice in Fort Myers, Florida, and Southwest Florida. So for my audience that is not in this area, we have a high volume. It's a high
Hmm.
retirement area. We have a lot of older adults who do retire here. So our patients and clients tend to be geriatric in nature, even though they're living longer and younger lives. Those are the things that we tend to see in our practices. But when that happened, when your dad was diagnosed, did your professional brain turn on immediately, or did you first respond as a daughter?
Oh, that's a great question. As the siblings, I definitely had the advantage to have immediate understanding of the condition, I'd say, as like the clinical, what it is really, the journey of that patient. My siblings are engineers, and I'm the one who ended up in healthcare. So I had that as an immediate understanding in a sense. So then thinking personally for us, I live in Florida and my parents are in Ohio. So that was my immediate challenge, right? Of knowing things will change and how we're going to be there for them, for both of them, right? My mother and my father, the caregiver and the patient throughout the time as disease does progress. So that was definitely an immediate thing for us that we thought about here. I also have three small kids, right? And wanted them to be as close to grandparents and their grandfather too throughout this. So it was like it was a both and. I think I became uh what would you call that, like a Google for my siblings of like what's the wiki synopsis of this and what are we dealing with, what are we talking about. So you wear two hats in those settings when you're the single healthcare worker of a family. Yeah.
I can totally relate to that because that's my situation, and I walked my mom through vascular dementia. I can tell you
Hmm.
that at times I did reach out to my colleagues for something
Yeah.
I'm an expert in because I'm a daughter first. So I
Yes.
don't know if you related to that, but let's talk about. I want to talk about some very specific things that are important to me, and I think to our listening audience. So we know there's no cure for Alzheimer's disease or related dementias, right? But when you take out the word cure, right, what remains? Quality of life. So what does
Yes.
improvement, or what was your goal even with your dad? Is it slower functional decline, better energy, stronger balance?
Yep.
What does that look like when you're telling people who may be actively diagnosed with Parkinson's disease or another neurodegenerative disease? What is your drive for them, getting them to really look at this and the value that it will bring to their life?
Yeah, I think for me with this, the book and bringing together all the research like that, putting the tracker in, I was actually more probably in response to my mom, as a caretaker, the one who does all the cooking. And though I'd been a dietitian for almost a decade at that point, and she does a lot of cooking, and we've had many of these conversations before, it was a stressful time, right? A lot of adjustment mentally into the phase of life. And my mom's asking me questions. I'm like, I know you know the answer to this. Like, I know we've talked about these things before. I'm like, I know you know what I'm going to say, right? So it's also providing like resources and tools for people navigating those complexities. And sometimes we're seeking like a bit of control, right? And like, what can we do? Because there is that unknown of, we don't know how fast this is going to progress. I feel out of control because, this happened to me and never expected it. So what can I do? And that's where this can be a resource. If we're going to fuel our bodies for that quality of life piece that you mentioned, and looking at really that like health span versus the lifespan, increasing like the health span, here's some tools in the kitchen, right? Some foods to have and some to minimize, to really have that lifestyle influence over this journey.
Well, I want to get back to the book again, and I will go over this deeper in another episode, but you actually put a tracker in there. I will say this was
Yeah.
such an easy read for me, but
Mm-hmm.
not just a read. I didn't read it and set it down. Like, I picked it up a few times to look back
Mm-hmm.
at it. It's just really written that way. But talk
Yeah.
about the tracker for someone like your mom, right? We women, it's almost International Women's Day, so I don't know when this is going to air, but it is this Sunday. We want to do something. We want to contribute
Yeah.
something. We want to feel like we're making a difference, no matter if it's big or small. But, for someone
Mm-hmm.
like your mom, that tracker, I could see that tracker being invaluable. And although you don't prescribe being perfect,
Not at all.
no, talk about the tracker, talk about getting started, and why the
Yeah.
tracker could make a difference, whether you're 100% or 60%.
Absolutely. And that really stemmed from my days more working one-on-one with patients. And it builds really that tool and accountability. So I have it broken down by the different groups to include, and, boxes to check that. And tracking for any type of behavior change that we're looking for builds awareness. So it helps compound that accomplishment, that feeling of success when you have greens and you do have berries. And then you can then plan for opportunity. Even there, fish is on the tracker. It shows up daily. We don't eat fish daily in my household, right? But it's a reminder that it's there, so it helps you plan. There's also a spot for gratitude. Gratitude changes your brain neurologically as well with the positivity. So encompassing the foods and the lifestyle piece was important to me from that like psychosocial perspective as well.
So for caregivers listening, how does food and movement give families that sense of influence, and even in the face of a progressive diagnosis?
Yeah. Yeah. One thing about food is it's very social. So not only are we saying the person who may have memory decline needs to eat, the caregivers do too. The family does. It's gathering. So it's really the Mind Diet's a universal prescription, right? So for the caregiver, there's benefits in cooking this way to reduce inflammation, to help them feel optimized, sleep better at night, to have that energy and stay more level with their blood sugar, so it's not fluctuating all over the place. Same thing with the physical activity. That's a great outlet for stress. It can be personal time possibly, and something important for their own health as well. So some of these activities are things that can be done together, and some may be more individual. And food being a thing, right? Everybody has to eat. So this protocol really benefits all in the equation, and giving that caretaker the permission and to care for themselves at the same time, right? So this is a both and. Yes, it could help slow progression or help the patient feel a little better, but it's also really a form of self-care too. When you talk about fueling yourself with healthy foods and sleeping well and getting some exercise in is all part of self-care for the caregiver as well.
So, what would you say to someone who's considering getting your book, and where do they get your book, Carrie?
Yeah. Um, so it's a quick read. I love that you mentioned that, and that was my intent. I wanted someone to be able to sit down with it over maybe like a weekend, pick it up a few times, and be able to read through the whole thing. I built it with a list, just some food suggestions and examples, and then the tracker. The tracker is 30 days worth in the back to really get somebody started on the protocols. Um, so really simple. It's not going to be here to overwhelm you or sensationalize things. There's not going to be a whole supplement list or anything like that that you have to go out and buy. It's really meant to be education, a tool, and then the tracking resource. The place to find the book is on Amazon. You can simply search my name as the author and it pops right up. I'm the only Carrie Bloemers on Amazon, and you just add it to your cart.
Yes, that's Carrie Bloemers, Bloemers. So I want you to know and understand that. Last question, Carrie, before I close this segment. If someone is 70 years old and wondering whether dietary change matters, what does the research say and what do you advise?
Yes, it matters. That's what the research says, right? That's going to impact that quality of life during that health span versus just that lifespan, meaning how healthy are your years as you age? And there's specific needs we have as we get older too, maybe increased protein needs for muscle mass and balance, and really just encourage everyone to not write themselves off, right? I think that happens in all age groups, but ultimately as you get older, you may not think there's anything that you can do that really matters, or I don't have that much time left. And people are living a pretty long time, and it's how do you want to experience that, right? The high quality active, being able to go out and do and experience life, or the slow creep of more chronic disease that leads to some of that homebound and social isolation as well. So really encourage anyone to start. If it's one thing, just start eating those cup of leafy greens every single day, or that handful of berries to get you started. So it can be very simple.
Carrie, thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
To my listening audience, what I want you to take from this conversation is nutrition is not a magic cure. It's not a guarantee, but it's a modifiable risk factor. It is a lever we can pull. Carrie has led us in that path today. It's a daily decision that accumulates. It may not erase diagnosis, but it can influence resilience and quality of life. Carrie, again, I want to thank you both for bringing your personal story as well as your professional insight to the disappearing mind. And to our listeners, your brain is influenced by what you do today. Small choices compound and make a difference in your future. I hope that you will continue to listen, subscribe, and share the Disappearing Mind podcast. Until next time, this is Dawn Platt. Make it a memorable day.
Thank you for joining us for the Disappearing Mind podcast. We hope it's helped you find clarity and support along your journey. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode, visit our website to suggest future topics, and share the podcast with friends and family.